Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Hi.
Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
Hello to the audience. Give us just 1 second. We'll be ready to start. We're just going to give you a few moments to share the link. Send this out to your friends.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Hi.
Can you hear it?
Share
I think there's like a delayed echo a little bit, like literally a few seconds.
Yeah, there probably is. Hopefully that resolves itself
Okay.
as we
If you
go.
see
We're
me
just going
looking
to
to the
wait.
side, it's the little.
We're going to wait for 2 minutes. We're going to let everybody just share the link. And we'll start in just a moment. I hope everybody has been enjoying the service. I only caught a couple of minutes of the other service of this other sermon, but what I caught was fantastic.
It was fire.
It was absolute fire. So we're gonna have a good time after this watching that. But we're gonna be talking about relationships this evening. There's been a bit of confusion, not romantic relationships of all kinds. So brotherly love, friendships, our relationships with each other as members. We're going to do all of that this evening. We've got people joining us from the Cayman Islands. Welcome. Guys, I'm just going to ask if any of you have got the stream on another device, just mute it. Just so there's no echo. That would be fantastic. We're just going to give you a couple of more minutes just to send the link around, share the link, so that we all can get involved.
I should come in right now with this face.
Let the whole world see you. Oh, I thought I was on mute. Don't do it. That's
No, that's it. That's stuff right there.
We've got a hacker. We've got a hacker.
Don't judge me. Don't judge me.
Curtis, you know this 2,000 people can see you right now, Curtis.
That's what I'm saying.
Right
we are
now.
being hacked.
Right now.
I've got
Okay.
my 2 cents to put into this conversation. All right, I'm going now.
Better relationships mean you have to wear a face mask.
A face mask. And
So
put
you
clay
can-
all
you can
over
look
your
handsome.
wife.
You can look handsome for your wife. I like it. Okay, so we've got I think we've got a good momentum coming on. Unfortunately, we've lost Abigail. Abigail, if you're watching, if you're listening, you'll have to moderate with me through text. We can't go beyond 6 panelists, but we're gonna get going. Curtis, you've got some fans on the chat here who appreciated your face mask. I think they want you to drop your skincare routine at some point. So if after the stream, let them know how you're looking so amazing, that would be great. So we'll start the conversation tonight. As you've seen on the promotion, on the posters, and on our communications, we're going to be talking about relationships in church, all kinds of relationships, how we commune with one another, how we form our friendships, how we relate to each other. We're going to talk about all of those things and see how we can really learn from each other about how to create better relationships in church. If I can just ask everybody to mute their mics whilst we're not talking, and then as and when you give your responses, we can bring you back in. So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. I hope you guys follow along and are blessed by the conversation. This is all happening within the context of all of us have been in this boat together with COVID, and in one way or another, our relationships have been impacted by the lack of physical connection and physical contacts that we've been restricted from having. And as a result, we've all gone to our online platforms in order to relate to each other. Now, for some parts of our demographic, the youngers, the people who are under 30 years old, this was normal life already. They were already relating to each other. Juanita's looking a bit, I was relating online as well. So, okay, sorry, I apologize. For some people, regardless of age, they were already relating to each other online. as what we call them, digital natives. So for them, this was quite an easy transition for them to make. And for those of us who are not as digitally comfortable or native, we've had to learn and pick up some new skills over this time of how to keep in touch with friends and family, and even how to keep in touch with other church members and connect with one another in fellowship using technology. But as we begin to see the governments releasing the lockdown restrictions, and as we anticipate going back to some level of normality, and as we predict and anticipate what church is going to be like as we enter the new normal, is the new phrase that everybody's talking about, we want to just reflect a little bit on how we can learn from this period, from this experience that we've all had, the shared experience, in making our relationships better, in having more meaningful relationships, more fruitful relationships. And in light of all of this, I just want to begin with a very light question. And in fact, before we get into the question, I want to ask you guys just to quickly introduce yourselves. I know who all of you are, but our audience doesn't necessarily know who you are. So Helena, beginning with you, if you can just let us know who you are, where you go to church, and if you grew up in church or whether you came in at a later time.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Helena. I was brought up in church. I come from a generation of Adventists in my family. So I will be speaking from maybe some of that perspective if we do get asked those questions. And I think it's really important to recognize that as well in the way that I think and the influences that have been around me since, birth. In terms of my church, I go to Reading Central Church. That's my home church. I've moved around, and just looking forward to opening up the discussion with everyone here today.
Fantastic, Reading crew. I'm glad that you're here. Laura, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, so I'm Laura. I'm actually originally from Lithuania. But my personal background is actually in sales and marketing. Started with cold watering ministry and vibe work and those kind of things back in the day. But yeah, I'm a part of Reading Parkside Church, Parkside Community Church. So I'm the elder there, and I just love people. I love God the best I can, growing in that. And as a result, so I think relationships in general, I mean, that's what makes life worthwhile. That's what makes happy or miserable. So I think this is a critical topic, and there's definitely new dynamics on the scenery right now that we should be ready for.
Fantastic, thank you, Laura.
I didn't grow up in church. I grew up an atheist. I came into church when I was 17, so got baptized because of the missionaries that came from the United States over to Lithuania, and so my life was radically changed, and I definitely saw a difference in relationship in terms of Christian relationships versus worldly. So definitely.
Okay, so we'll definitely get into that. I learned something new about my friends every day. I didn't know that you grew up atheist, but we'll delve into that. Pastor Gillen, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, how you guys doing? Hope everybody's doing well. My name is Warren Gillen. I am currently pastoring the Reading Central and the Parkside. So we have a large Reading folks in the house. So Helena and my elder as well. So I'm glad to have joined this panel. Previously, I was pastoring the Holloway Southern Adventist Church as an intern there. So just shout out to any Holloway people in the chat. I'm originally from Stratford Church. That's where I was born and bred and grew up. Relationship, that's the bread and butter of humanity, man. We are created to be in relationship with one another. We're not created to be an island. And this is a good conversation.
Fabulous. Now we move into London. Juanita, if you can please introduce yourself.
We're moving into the south of London. My name is Juanita Powell. I've been in church for 39 years without giving away my age, since I was 6. And I grew up in Willesden Church, and since being married, went to Battersea, and now worshiping at London Live. It's good to be part of this conversation because we run a ministry called This Is Marriage, and we have lots of conversations, myself and my husband, about relationships, singleness, marriage, anything to do with relationships, really.
Yeah.
And so we consider the most important relationship being between the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So in following after their example, they're expecting us to be in relationships, and in good ones and in authentic ones. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Shelley Prince.
Thank you for introducing me. As Tom said, I'm Shelley Prince. Not much to say, really. I am in West London. I go to Cornerstone and Hanworth. So Hanworth for my husband and myself, because we like small churches. Cornerstone because we have 2 littles under 3, and they like to play with and fellowship with their other children that are their ages, and there's quite a number there, and that's also something to deal with this conversation, because different churches provide different things for different people at different stages of their life, which means that there's different relationships that develop and build over time, and the fluidity of that. But from West London, born and raised everywhere, to be fair. I was baptized in Croydon Church and served there for a very long time. And then moved over to Willesden Church, and I was the youth leader and choir leader there. So wherever I've been, I'm always serving in some capacity.
Good.
And also London Live. So I go to London Live. We love church in our house. So I tend to do church a lot on a day.
Good.
Yeah. So that's me.
So thank you for introducing yourselves and giving us some of your background. The first question I want to ask you guys is, looking back on your journey through church, Laura, I know you didn't grow up in church, but looking back from the earliest memory in church, what was the most meaningful relationship you remember having in church? What was the most fun relationship, most engaging, the most authentic, the one that kind of you really remember from your earliest time in church? What was that, and what was that like? If we can start with Laura, what was that like when you came into church at 17?
Yeah, well, for me, it's interesting because one of the very first sort of commissions or like advices that I got when I got baptized into the church, and obviously some people are looking out to make sure that I don't drop out the back door and whatever not. So one of the very first advices I got from the person that actually was the most exciting, I was actually a person that was instrumental in bringing me to the church, was he said, Laura, if you do not find over the next year 7 friends that you can call friends who you contact outside of church hours, throughout you might drop out very much. So, I mean, statistically speaking. So he said, find 7 people that you're connected with. And I took it seriously because he really, I mean, he stressed just how important that is. And looking back, that is the case. But but the relationships or the friendships, the initial ones that really stuck out to me, is really the people that took personal interest in me, and people who really, I felt like they cared for my well-being, whether it's spiritual or otherwise, but just truly people who cared for me in a personal way, not necessarily people who spoke nice in front of the pulpit or were big shot people. Those were I admired, but those weren't the people that really impacted me. It was the individual friendships who went out of the way to connect with me personally.
I like that answer. I like that. Helena, if you tell us a bit about your early relationships, or what relationships really stuck out for you?
I'd say my relationship with my grandparents in church, actually.
Okay.
Every time I went to church, I know I see my grandparents there. And I think, sort of losing a grandparent, that was quite impactful to me. Going back into the same building which I grew up, where I knew my grandparents would sit in those same seats. Having those fond memories of church where, my granddad used to bring sweets and give to the children after church. And
I remember that,
relationships, you remember that. So I would say those are some of the really fondest memories I have growing up from as a young child, in Reading Central Church.
Warren, what were some of your early relationships growing up in church that you remember?
To be honest, I wouldn't say one relationship. I would say relationship, and it's probably even up until today. We are still friends. We are still brothers, and it's kind of just the group of friends that we had growing up in Stratford. Just a group of boys. Up to this day, we're still close. We still meet up. In fact, we still go and then during this pandemic time, we go on cycle and rides and stuff like that, even up to this day. So those are my brothers, man. Those are my friends that we met in church. We had grown up in church, and even though they may not be there every week, we're still connected. We're just brothers, man, and I think that's one of the most meaningful relationships in church from young that has materialized even to this day, where we are still very much close, just as close as we were when we were young children running around church and making trouble, etc. So yeah.
Shelley, what would you say was one of your earliest relationships in church that really meant the most to you? You're muted still, Shells.
My foundations was Grandma Hanson's house on Friday night worship. Well, would now we can call it Friday night worship, but it used to be very trying when we were little, because Grandma used to send us upstairs and tell us we needed to learn an additional memory verse to whatever memory verse we had for the week. And her memory verses were not just one verse. So the one that stuck out to me was Psalms. It was a whole chapter she asked us to do. She said, if you come down and you say one word, wrong word, we're going to have a problem. And that was myself, Shay, Monica and Charlene, our cousin Charlene. And we had to go upstairs and recite it and come back down. And this wasn't like a week. We had got this in like an hour. But every Friday, we would have Friday night worship, and Grandma's house, literally Grandma Hanson's house. Everybody from Luton Church has been through Grandma Hanson's house. That's what relationship for me is about. That's not my earliest memory, but that's what for me church was about. It wasn't just about Sabbath. Sabbath was an extension of the family at Grandma's house, where she fed everybody, and we got beat together, and we would eat together, and everybody that went through that house knew about salad cream on everything. That was, everybody understands when you say certain things that came from Grandma Hanson's house. And for me, that really taught me about relationship. And I always say, if you see some of my random and very infrequent messages on Facebook or wherever, I always say that friendships is not just for Sabbath. At Seventh-day Adventists, we do fall into that trap sometimes where we see people on Sabbath and we see people on Sabbath, and that's as far sometimes as it goes. And that's not what friendship and relationship is about. It's more than just Sabbath. And Grandma instilled that into me. And that's to beautiful. Those that went through that house.
That's beautiful. Juanita.
Well, you used to hear a couple of the elders say, you don't come to church for friends. And I really disagree with that, because you do come to church for friends. You should find friends in church. Do you know what I mean? And the friends that I found in church in Willesden, there's about 15 of us, and we speak weekly still. A lot of them don't go to church anymore, but they are my most spiritual connection. Do you know what I mean? So one of them I speak to maybe 5 times a week, and I ignore one of her calls. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a lot, but I love her. But we are friends, and we have been friends from then, and we are still friends, and we still keep communication up through WhatsApp. When COVID-19 hit, we had Zoom chats. And prior to that, we used to meet at least twice a year. One of those meetings would be at Willesden Church, where we would come to church as a group. It was a heavy group, do you know what I mean? Come to church, all the old people were so happy to see us. We got kisses, we got these sweets, what they had in their pocket from 1982. And we had all the love, do you know what I mean? And then the second part of the year, we would go to a restaurant or something like that. And we still do that. And I'm so grateful for them. They're my foundation, and they still remain very close to my heart. So they're my best mates. We still are friends.
That's beautiful. And one thing that kind of resonates between all of you is the fact that these people were in your life beyond just Sabbath, like these people who had genuine connection and genuine interest in you. I grew up in Reading Central as well with Helena. We grew up together. We've known each other since day one. And I remember Brother Malcolm, her granddad, who used to give us Werther's Originals on Sabbath. And we used to come out really excitedly from the service and look for him, and he would come out and give everybody sweets. And that was such a fantastic memory for me. But the relationship that really stands out for me was Steve Griffiths, and he's still somebody who I respect a lot today, and we whenever we catch up, it's always honest conversation. And the reason why he was always such an amazing influence for me was because he was an older guy and a kind of like a father figure, uncle figure, but I could always be my complete self with him. Like I didn't feel like I had to front with him or pretend, or I didn't have to put on my performance. You know, all of us have a church performance that we've perfected over time. Like especially those of us who have grown up in church, you understand how to get into church and get into the play. You understand what I mean when I say the play? That we know our performance. Happy Sabbath, happy Sabbath. How are you? I'm blessed. I'm not too bad, or I can't complain. Or if you're with the man, then it's, oh, I'm trying to be like you, brother. Like I'm seeing how you're doing your thing, and if I could be half the man you are, if I could touch the hem of your garment. The amount of times I've met Warren and said, if I could touch the hem of your garment, I will be whole. It is amazing. But this is kind of like the performance that we put on at church. And despite the fact that the most meaningful relationships we have are the ones with the people that we could be our authentic and true selves with, what, in your experience, are some of the reasons why we begin to feel like we have to put on these performances and these masks, and why we can't be our whole and true self that we are perhaps in the week on Sabbath when we meet some of these people? Warren.
Yeah, I think it's the whole notion of the church maintaining a standard. And I'm thinking that what really, when you look at it, what really is standard, like what really is Jesus' standard. And sometimes it seems as if the church's standard and Jesus' standard is a little bit different. And I understand it, that obviously we're an institution, we're an organization, and we're trying to create some form of order, in a sense. That's what our organization is essentially is. But I think it stems from creating a standard. And I think within Adventism, we like to be so, I guess, different and so remnant, that in order to kind of perpetuate that kind of theology, we have to create some sort of standard whereby it can show that we are distinct from somebody else. And I think from that idea of standard, that's where the mask is, because it becomes more performative. It becomes more of putting on a show, putting on a performance, in order to show that I have met this standard, to show that I have met the criteria to fit this position, or, you know, to fit this kind of image that we have to kind of upkeep. And I think it derives from standard, and I think it derives from our understanding of what grace is. And I think that's where we really get this whole mask thing, this whole mask thing from.
Juanita, what's been your? I like that, and I agree. We'll come back to that issue of standard. Juanita, what's been your experience of why we feel compelled or feel the need to maybe put on some of these masks?
I think as a child growing up in Adventism, the culture is thick. So you either conform or you drop out. And there's a uniformity that you've got to stick with, and you've got to stay with. And so that's been my experience. I would consider myself growing up quite a conformist. Now I feel like I'm shaking all that off. I mean, it's late, but I'm shaking it off. But so I fitted in all right. And then I think some of my friends who weren't so great at rule keeping and uniformity, and they dropped out. I agree with what Warren said in terms of that. It was our lack of understanding of grace does that. So I learned about what grace was in the year 2000. I mean, that's not long ago. You know what I mean? That's 20 years ago. That's when I was 25. I learned about grace being in church when I was 6. In prior to that, I had a list of things that I didn't do. I didn't eat pork. I didn't eat prawn cocktail crisp. I didn't have Frazzles bacon crisp. I didn't even know how bacon tastes. I wasn't having sex. I wasn't going raving. I wasn't wearing jewelry. My skirts weren't short. So therefore, I was keeping up with that standard. But what that did is created some kind of internal struggle within where I didn't know myself. I didn't know who Christ was, but I knew how to stay in uniformity. I knew how to tie my tie tight, how to make sure the blazer was on. In contrast to that, my home wasn't like that. My mom is quite a free thinker. She came into the faith a couple of years after we did. And she was able to allow us to be progressive Adventists at home and didn't enforce this mask mentality, didn't enforce this, you have to be like everybody else and there's a standard. It was just Christ was the standard. That was at home. Unspoken peripheral voices were louder than my mum's and they were stronger. And that is now what I'm having to undo, is understanding, you know, who I am in relation to this culture.
Yeah.
And how strong this culture has been on my life. Not everything has been bad.
Yeah.
But some bits have been nothing to do with Jesus Christ at all. But the person was cool to run with it.
I find that such a powerful thing that I think resonates with a lot of people who grew up in church, is that we were more acquainted with the standard that Warren has talked about than we were with Jesus Christ for much of our early Christian experience. I'm interested to know, Laura, when you came in, because obviously you came in a lot later towards the back end of your teenage years. Did you feel, what was your experience first coming in? Did you feel, did you notice the performance? Did you see it? Did you feel compelled to join in, or were you quite authentically yourself from day one?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, because I, chose to follow Christ, or, to choose God rather than not. So for me personally, it was genuine, all the time, generally speaking. But of course, we all have, we go through our personal journeys as well. And, but the first thing that I noticed in the church and what really, really drew me in was the fact that people were so nice. So masks, no masks, I don't know, but you guys were nice to me, I mean, it was the first time in my life when I experienced where when I made a mistake, people weren't coming down on me, but they were actually looking for solutions and supporting. And maybe God handpicked the people that I was around, because it's a bunch of student missionaries, teenagers, and early 20s. Those are the people that reached to me, which was incredible. So for me, I saw that ideal, and like you guys are talking till now, I'm feeling like you were telling how you grew up, your grandma, this and this. These are your memories. These are your roots. For me, I remember I was thinking, I can't believe these people actually grew up with this stuff. I mean, I didn't know Genesis from Revelation. I didn't know what Bible was. I didn't know that word meant nothing to me, Bible, when I came to church, And here are these people know all the stories, they know where to flip and find a verse and whatnot. To me, that was just crazy. I thought people grew up with this. At the same time, after some time, which is normal, I guess, in any Christian growth experience, after a few months, I'd say, I started noticing the inconsistencies and hypocrisy and in the very people that I thought were like perfect nearly, which kind of really mesmerized me. But I started noticing the inconsistencies, and that definitely, it hit like a little of a crisis of me trying to figure out, so wait a minute, what's going on here? And as the time went, I started realizing that a lot of the people that grew up in church, they actually they didn't seem to have that kind of genuine relationship with Jesus that I thought everybody had, because they were in church and they're Christian. So I started to see that big difference straight away. And, and just going back to your question, like, why do we put on masks? I think whether in church or not, I mean, church adds a lot more pressure for sure, because, like I heard the saying, and it's true, we come to Christ because we're imperfect and we're messed up and we need him. But then when we're in with Christ, in church, we spend the rest of our time trying to prove that we're perfect. This is crazy. That's why we came to Christ, because we're not perfect, right? So, but one of the, I think some of the key reasons why we pretend and put on those masks is simply because we're afraid that if the true self comes out, if people see us for who we truly are, which we all are messed up, really, that people will not like us, will not accept us. And that is a real fear anywhere in life. And that's why God is so attractive, because he knows us through and through, but he still likes me. That is just incredible. Yeah, but I definitely saw the difference in the people in time. I saw that the people that seemed so perfect inside they were kind of empty, and I was the one encouraging them in Christ, and they were looking at me and like in awe, like, oh, this person doesn't even know anything, but there they are encouraging me. So it's real, you know, that when you're in tradition of something, you know, make sure that it's your thing, your choice, rather than just a tradition. Yeah.
Shelley, what has been your experience with regards to performance and mask, and if you have experienced this, how has it then shaped your relationship with God now? How do you kind of manage those two things?
So I guess anybody that knows me, I speak quite plainly. I think more so when I married my husband, because he's the plainest speaker you'll ever meet. But I think the mask that we have in church is learned behavior. It's learned behavior that we are taught in church, and it's time for us to teach authentic Christianity. And the way that, I think for me, my masks were, I will say, chipped away through the programs that I went into. So the teens ministry for my generation, for the 21 plus change people, small change people, is, and it's not a small change either, was the best teens ministry, I think, ever. And I might be slightly biased, but our teens ministry period was just hands down the best. Memories were made, ministers were made, youth leaders were made, a lot of leaders, not necessarily in the church, were made and created, and a lot of the things that were spoken about was about authentic Christianity, although it wasn't necessarily packaged in that kind of term. It was about being authentic with pursuing Jesus. And as a result, the learned behavior that I had, that was put upon me, was slowly being chipped away, and it was so uncomfortable. I felt like somebody was literally just chipping at me, and I felt lost, if I'm honest, to some extent. And in terms of, well, who am I? And the thing we have in church is people put labels on us as well. So the labels that I was, and like you said earlier, Tom, when you meet people and you have this performance and you say, oh, can I touch the hem? People would be like, oh, you sing, so you must be in the A. And this was an Andrewism. You are in the A class. You're and I hated that term so much, because what that did was people used to put their label upon me, not knowing what my journey was in church or understand what I had to deal with during the week. So by default of you putting that label on me, other people would hear that and then reinforce that label, when actually that would be nothing. That would be not a part. That's nothing to do with me. That's not part of me. I happen to sing, but that doesn't mean I have, because what happens is when you're given a label, there's associated behaviors and expectations and characteristics that people assign to you, that label. And so you either fit that bubble or you don't. And it's difficult to navigate. And I think for me, I think that's why I gravitate more towards smaller churches, because in the larger churches, I feel that for me personally, whilst I love big church and big worship and big corporate worship, the masks that I see are more. In smaller churches, you can't afford to have masks because they're so small that you are dependent on the next person next to you. You have to love your neighbor, even if they step on your toe, because next week that person is required to do praise and worship, to play the piano, to then go in the kitchen and cook, to then come back and then help out, clean up the. Smaller churches are more reliant on each other to operate and function.
So the facades come off a lot faster.
I think even if there is a facade, you have to put it aside at some point. Even if it's you put it on in the morning, come at 10:30, you've got it on. Come 11 o'clock, it's got to go, because you just can't. There's too few people for you to be juggling all of these faces. So I think that's why I gravitate to that, and then I tend to go and visit larger churches on a regular basis. But I think for me, the learned behavior, what we need to start learning about is being authentic and being an authentic Christian. because that is more appealing to others more than anything else, I think.
So, Helena, I want to bring you in on this a little bit, because we obviously grew up in church together, and I'm interested to see how we were experiencing that same environment. Did you see this? Did you notice a performance? Did you feel any compulsion to involve yourself in the performance? And if so, how do you think we can begin to change our practices and policies in church so that we don't feel like we have to perform?
Yeah, I think there's performance all around us, in how, we all went to different schools. We all came from different backgrounds outside of church. So already we're having to perform in a certain way to conform, not to seem different, not to be treated differently. The same applies to when we come to church. If everybody kind of acts a certain way or talks in these different colloquialisms and things, I always laugh because I say Adventists talk very different, and I don't think we even realize how we actually communicate with each other. How and some of that performance actually led me to wonder, is anybody questioning these things? Like, was there space created for me to question why? What is tradition? What does tradition mean to me right now? Which kind of drove me to actually study biblical studies in a secular institution to understand, kind of put myself effectively in a firing line from other people from all different walks of life, atheists, whether you had any belief systems or not. And that was when I started to realize where my value came from, where I put value in my faith, as an Adventist. And I felt that that's when things started to change for me. It was kind of like just really pushing back and questioning why we do things, why I felt I had to conform in this way, and where the value actually really lies in my Christian walk now. And yes, because it requires us to put ourselves in the firing line. But I think as a group of young people in the church, we all want to feel included. We all want to feel together. And once somebody kind of breaks that chain or starts to question, it can kind of create disruption. But the great thing about Christianity is there's been disruption all the way through. And when we look at history, we see that happening. We see that, change is coming. And I think that's what's happened with COVID-19. I think this has disrupted the church. And then disruption doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It could be in a positive way in how we come out of it. So I think this is where relationships really, really come in here, to see how we're all coming out of this situation together. We've all been in this situation. Yeah.
Warren, I've got a question for you off the back of an observation I made growing up. When I was growing up, I remember a time when I was 19, 20, through my personal interactions led me into a circle of what we might refer to as, the prophecy heads, the guys who are only about 2300 day prophecy. Their major arguments over Sabbath lunches: who's the king of the north, who's the king of the south, what does Daniel this mean, what does Revelation mean? And I was starting to roll in these circles. The guys that have the charts in their house in the dining room, the chart with the whole time prophecy thing on there. I used to roll with people like this. So there was a time where they would have their weekly prophecy Bible studies, and if you came to the Bible study and you hadn't done like a BA, like a master's thesis worth of Bible study to understand what these new dates meant, then you had fallen back and you had completely fallen behind, and there was a very palpable sense of I've fallen away, like I've not met the standard. I don't know this new piece of information. I don't know what that symbol on the chart means. And it became a thing where our studying was, well, at least for me, my studying was no longer a thirsting for truth. It was, I need to show up next week and be able to make a banging point. Otherwise, I've fallen behind. And Warren, as a minister in church, how do we convey our standards and our teachings and our, we pride ourselves a lot on having the truth. How do we convey these things, these doctrines and our understanding of scripture without making them another platform for us to perform upon? So, obviously we have Sabbath school is a big part of our tradition, and Sabbath school is another place where we come to perform. People don't learn their Sabbath school always for the love of truth. They come so that when elder so and so asks me the question, I can bang. So how do we transmit our teachings without making them another platform upon which to perform?
Right. And I think that the simple question is, I guess, the reason why you are trying to communicate in the first place. And I get your concern totally that for a large part, especially kind of recent Adventism or the Adventism that our parents and grandparents are privy to, it has always been kind of information heavy, I should say. Adventism prided itself on knowing everything, literally knowing all the answers to the prophecies, decoding and unlocking Revelation and Daniel, and we see many times in our prophecy seminars, it's always some sort of unlocking or did you know type kind of element. And we've always been when we communicate, we've always been communicating in a fashion of, I know everything and I need to tell you this. And we know that real communication, authentic communication is dialogical. It's not just me telling you, but it works both ways. And I think where the Adventism that my mother and even some of our grandparents have been brought into is one of in a very informational age. And I sense where we are right now is that I think we're kind of information is so accessible nowadays as young people, and even as the generation before, where they can just go on Google and find what they need. Whereas Adventism kind of filled that gap for a large part, where they just keep telling you, giving you all the answers, giving you all the calculations, decoding and unlocking all of these things. And I think the way that we communicate a lot is that from a high horse, from a pedestal, that I know something you don't know. And our communication has always been to convert. Our communication has always been to let me tell you something. And I think that's where we kind of fall short a lot. And I think even in our communication of being the remnant church, that in and of itself could be problematic when communicating with other people, whoever it may be. And I think it's simply down to the reason why you communicate. What is the purpose of your communication, and communicating to understand and not just to just spew a lot of information. And I think when we think about conversations as two-way and not just one way, not just did you know, like fact, that kind of conversation, then I think we can move away from that. But I certainly get what you're saying in regards to having the right answers. And to be honest, as a pastor, you are almost seen to know everything. You're the fountain of knowledge. Sometimes you sit in a Sabbath school class, and they're like, Pastor, what do you say? And it's almost as if my word is gospel. And I get where that's coming from, but I also see problems in that. Sometimes even as a pastor, I can be forced to perform as well. So I definitely think that it's the way that we communicate, the reason why we communicate, and that we ought to communicate for understanding, not just for conversion.
So a question has come in through Facebook. Is John saying, as a white male coming into church around 2011, 2012, visiting various smaller and larger churches, initially I felt like people flocked towards me to pull me in and make me feel really welcome. And then he goes on to say, after settling in some churches, I realized that some of this enthusiasm was fake. So this kind of maybe resonates a little bit with what Laura was saying in terms of the initial energy versus what you then get after you become a regular member. How do we avoid this trap of being really excited and wanting the new people to feel like they're in and we love you and welcome, versus what we actually like with people that we've seen around our congregation for a longer time? How do we make that initial enthusiasm authentic and sustainable?
I think to jump in real quickly, I think John, he says that he's a white male, and I think it's simply because you are white. Why people are flocking to you. Let's be honest. And I think we have a way, because I don't know whether it's a white supremacist that is running through our level of theology or thinking, but when we see a white person come into our church, especially in a black predominant church, predominant church, one, we kind of blatantly know that this is a visitor because that person stands out. And secondly, we've been, I guess, through kind of campaigns into the 2010s upwards, we've been kind of socialized to try and get white people in. And I think that's simply because you're a white male. And that's kind of like a indigenous in the church, both in England and both in America as well.
I think something that connects. Shelley, please proceed.
Sorry, I need to disagree with you respectfully, Warren. I think it's the Adventist thing. I think that we are all about the numbers. Like from when time began, when I was younger, it was all about people in pools. How many people did you baptize at this campaign? And I agree with you to some extent, Warren, in that it's a new person and people are enthusiastic, and it's somebody that we don't usually see come to church, because, to be honest, it can be uncomfortable for somebody that looks like me to go to any of our churches. If I rock up in my church dress and my Converse shoes, because I have two littles and I'm not prepared to run around after my 2-year-old or 2.5-year-old son in heels just to let somebody else feel comfortable that I'm wearing church attire. But the reality is, we get excited about new faces, but we don't know how to, we don't get excited about the fact that they're interested in what we have. If that makes sense. There's a differentiation. We're interested in the fact that they've come. We don't really look at how we can keep that person, which is about relationship. If you actually ask somebody their name and you said and genuinely ask them who they are, then they will come back, even if it's not every week. So in Cornerstone, we have a lady called Auntie Sybil, and anybody that's come to Cornerstone knows Auntie Sybil, because if you walk through that door and Auntie Sybil's at church, she will literally jump on you. But she's not jumping on you because she wants to get your bum on the seat. She jumps on you because she's genuinely interested about who you are. And she will text you later and she will remember your name. If you came again 3-5 years later, she will, I remember you. She'll know you. She'll ask you if you want to come to church. If you don't come to church regularly, she has people that she's spoken to that will come and drop off offering that are not an Adventist, that will come and drop offering faithfully every week, ask for prayer and leave. But they faithfully come and return because they know that somebody is genuinely interested in them. Now we know that God will be moving with that person and through Auntie Sybil and the relationship that she's built. But how many more churches have a Auntie Sybil, or why aren't we Auntie Sybils? Why does it take one person in each church to be an Auntie Sybil? Why can't we be that person that's genuinely interested in, oh, I didn't see you last week. Are you okay? And not to say, what time do you call this? Because they've rocked up at 12:15. It's good to see you, because you don't know what morning they had. You don't know if they had a shift at the hospital. You don't know if they didn't have any gas or electricity or power in their house to shower. You don't know their situation. But when somebody walks in through your doors at whatever time, the first response should be, lovely to see you, regardless of whether they're a new member or a regular member. So I'm disappointed that that's how John's experience was, but I don't think it is exclusive to what we call Indigenous people. I think that is something that our churches need to develop, and it shouldn't be down to an interest coordinator. The fact that we have an interest coordinator says to me that we have an issue already. It's good to have one, but everybody should be an interest coordinator. That's what God requires of us if we're going to be ambassadors of the kingdom. We should be interested in his people.
Yeah, if I can...
Thank you for that. I think Juanita had a hand up, and then Laura.
Yeah, just quickly, I learned something yesterday which said grace without truth is meaningless, and truth without grace is mean, and grace with truth is medicine. And I suppose it's about that. When we are bringing new people into the church, it has to be a mixture of grace and truth. They have to run simultaneously. Also, there has to be so much authenticity attached to it. I am really interested in you. I really want to be your friend. And that's not possible with everybody, but at least a few people in the congregation might work better in a small church, as Shelley has said. But I was thinking of, there was a play which was done by Final Productions. It was called I'm Having Sex. And then they had a panel after church. And one of the characters was a young guy. He had locks. It was bleached. His pants were hanging down his knees. He had gold chains, fronts and everything. And he said to the church, you know, if I came here in character, would you accept me? And I said, no. I said, what would happen is you wouldn't be accepted as you were. You would be given a couple of weeks to transform your exterior. So it would be comments about where your pants are. And then it would be about your hair. So you will find yourself shaving your hair down, cutting it off maybe. You will find yourself in a suit. You will find yourself getting here at 9:30, conforming with the culture. But you will not be transformed. Do you know what I mean? You would not be you would not be converted. I said it. I mean, I got a lot of bad looks in church that day. But I said, because this is what I have seen. As long as that person, maybe somebody like John, you start looking like the rest of us. You're right. It's like a machine. You're okay now. He's got the label on the beans can. He's part of us.
Yeah.
Next. But if we took time and were authentic and allowed somebody like John to be his full authentic self. My name's John. I'm maybe I'm being stereotypical. I like heavy metal. I bet he doesn't. But say for somebody like I like heavy metal. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I like to go on long walks, or I eat my toenails. Okay, that is who John is, and that is who Christ has saved. And the eating the toenails bit, Christ is going to work on. Do you know what I mean? But we're not allowing people to be their authentic selves and have authentic relationships. We have to stop being a machine. We have to stop being a factory, putting a label on the can. Next, you look like us, let's get on with it. And so that's what I said earlier on. Grace mixed with truth is meaningful. And grace on its own is meaningless without truth. And grace with truth. Truth without grace is mean. And grace with truth is medicine.
I love
that.
that.
That's what we need to be offering.
I love that. Laura, you were coming in.
But just kind of on the back of what was said, I really think it is about shifting focus, because our focus as Adventists is catching them instead of then, you know, how do we live together? Because Jesus said, by this, they will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. You know, but we think, you know, okay, teach them 20 beliefs. You tell them the prophecies, you teach them Daniel 2, 7, 9, whatever, you know, they accept Ellen White, you can baptize them. They're going to be paying tithe. They're not going to drink coffee or whatever. You can baptize them. And then that's it. They're fine. But then reality is when Jesus is talking about church, he's talking about community. So our focus is to catch them. It's kind of like dating, you know. When you first date somebody, you're like, oh, you pull your best stops out, everybody from both ends, you know. And then when a relationship becomes, you know, kind of like, okay, I got you, then, you know, then the true things come out, who we truly are. And again, it's about the focus. Jesus says, this is how the world will know that you're mine, that I'm yours, that you're Christian, that you're different. It's the way you relate to one another. So again, to answer, like in my mind, the question that was raised is, we really need to shift focus into how do we foster the relationships within the church community, because it's a family. It's a family. And that's what eternity is going to be like. It wasn't so long ago, literally like about 2 years ago, because I'm a very independent person. I'm an extremely independent person. And I think that's today, generally, we have that thing going. And about 2 years ago, it hit me that I'm not sure I would want to, you know, like if eternity means hanging out with the church members the whole time, I'm like, I don't know if I like that idea. I'm being honest with you. Because I was thinking, you know, I can go do my life, you know, not that I'm living, you know, like differently, you know, specifically, but in church, there is a play you put on, or people expect especially if you're, you know, upfront a little bit more, than people straight away expect you to have some sort of supernatural standard or something like that. So I realized that I was also starting to like, you know, okay, what's going on? So anyway, God brought me through a journey and still taking me through that, where I had to recognize that these people in church, they're my family. And unless I open up to them and allow them to open up to me, and we start forging true connections and true relationships, I mean, I don't know, I'm ready for heaven, because I'm not sure that that's my first go-to thought, you know, like Jesus, the tree of life, great. But all these people, you know, it's like, seriously? But I'm one of them, you know? So again, focus on how to build and maintain relationships. I think we'll take care of all the other issues, because people will come in and they'll see how we're with each other for real. And they'll want to be a part of that, rather than us just impressing them. And then, you know, okay, well, you're here now. So all cool.
Helena, and then we'll move on to the next point of conversation.
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. I think one of the things about sort of building relationships and things, it requires vulnerability. You know, we have to want to be vulnerable, and I think that's really important part of, or maybe something that's missing in our churches, simply because of this performative aspect. Which, you know, I feel has been quite embedded in our tradition, in the sense of when we go to church, we have to dress a certain way. You know, like Juanita said, if you walk through the doors, you know, dress a certain way, people are going to be waiting for you to kind of acclimatize over the next few weeks and adjust yourself. And I think that, you know, Christ says, come as you are. So when someone comes as they are, you know, there can be some judgment. And I think we need to, you know, maybe create spaces where people can be more vulnerable, and that involves letting people come as they are, simply walk through the doors as they are, and we will just want to get to know you. We're not trying to push the Bible in your face, but through building that relationship, through me showing Christ-like actions, that's how, you know, we can start to build deep and meaningful Christ-like relationships. You know, there are times where people outside of the Adventist church may have treated me much better than my own peers, or, you know, other people in the church environment. How can I connect that together? You know, what has kept me anchored? What has kept me here? And I think it's certain relationships we build with people, but also your Christ-like actions. It's not just about Adventism. It's about what actions you are actually, you know, showing and displaying and, you know, carrying out in your life. So I just wanted to make that as a real clear point.
No, I get that. And as we proceed in the conversation, I think it occurs to me that as I'm listening to you guys talk, that there's a disconnect that exists in two places: the way we convey Christ and the way we relate with each other. The missing part in both is the fact that there's no relationship focus on either side. So when it comes to the conveying of Christ, it's about the information and the Bible knowledge and the doctrine, but we're not really having a major focus on the relational aspect of giving people Christ. And therefore it reflects on how we deal with each other, which is just about formality and making sure church is running and the performance, but there isn't, again, a emphasis on the relational side. And I wonder what would happen if we stopped, as Warren was intimating earlier, the desperation that we seem to have about creating exceptional people through this conveyor belt system that Juanita spoke about, and instead just say, you've come, here's Christ, and let's walk together. And so it becomes a journey where we all develop as we go through this journey, as opposed to you have to develop before the next baptism because we need you to be on the books or we need you to become a tithe-paying member. And as I reflect on this reality, I remember, and I spoke about this yesterday, I remember when I was 14, 15, a guy came to our church. I remember you might remember this, Helena, and did a series for 2 weeks called The Truth About Hip Hop, where he told us how evil secular music was essentially, and how bad syncopated rhythms were, and how bad the electric guitar was, and how we can't worship if there's a drum in the church. And he did this whole thing, and he was very talented in his oratory ability, because all of us as teenagers were frightened to death. Everybody went home and took their Walkmans and their cassette tapes that they've been recording illegally from MTV Base. They threw them all in the bin. They took all of their CDs that they were illegally burning from their online music streaming. I can't remember what the online music streaming thing was called, actually. Maybe Warren, you remember? What is it? LimeWire. There you go. All of my online criminals are coming out now in the comments. But everybody, all of this music that we had all accrued over the last however long since we were allowed to have gadgets all went in the trash because we were all scared that we don't want the devil to come into the house. And so everybody aligned themselves to this reality for about 22 days, 25 days max. Let's give them grace and say it was a month. And within a month, everybody went and bought all of their music back, re-recorded all their music back, re-burned all their CDs back, because it was never about true conviction or really making that decision as a product of journey. It was just about conforming to this message that had come in. And what I did notice though over the next 10, 15 years of our lives is that all of us naturally made decisions about the music and the things that we bring into our lives as far as entertainment is concerned, organically and naturally, based on our relationship and our journey with God and our spiritual journey. And so all of that kerfuffle that happened when we were 15 was completely unnecessary. All we had to do was to allow people the space to go on their journey with God. And I guess my question then comes, when you have something like this, when you have a very kind of doctrine forward, information forward way of conveying the Bible, it inevitably will lead to disagreement. I don't see things like that. Warren has spoken about this. I don't see things the way he sees it. Shelley said that I don't see things the way she sees it. Me and Shelley have debates all the time. Sometimes we win each other over. Sometimes we have to come off the phone and say, you know, I love you, but I don't agree with what you said. How do we disagree with each other and still love each other? I think that's a key thing for Adventists to grapple with, because oftentimes these, whether it's doctrine, whether it's the truth about hip hop, we make it a hill to die on. If you don't see what I see, then one of us is apostate and therefore must be cast out. How do we disagree with each other and still have genuine relationship with each other and love each other? Anyone can come in.
I think it's about understanding that we can disagree, but we shouldn't be disagreeable. People have different perspectives about different things, and that's okay. And you can have debates about things and conversations, as you alluded. Tom and I have the biggest, and they're very, very, very fiery. And I love them, and I wouldn't change them for the world, because it's not necessarily in the moment that you're having the discussions, it's the reflection of the discussions after, where you become changed, where you may think, oh, actually, he has a point. We had a discussion earlier today, and he said something to me, and 2 hours later, I had to call him up, and because I had time to mull over what he had said to me, and we had a further conversation. I think that people having different perspectives isn't a bad thing. It's just a different angle that the light is shed on something, and people see things differently. I'm a twin. And it doesn't mean, and so when me and my sister walk down the road and I see something and I say, and I see something and I say to her, did you see that? What she saw and what I saw are not going to be the same thing. And me and my twin always disagree on things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that one is right and one is wrong. It means that we've seen something differently. And so in order for us to get to the crux of the matter, we need to continue having that conversation in order for us to kind of either reach a stalemate and agree to disagree, or for one person to see the other person's perspective and say, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and maybe I need to fall back on my stance and vice versa. But it all comes with conversation. But if you can't respect the person that you're having the conversation with from the outset, you're not really going to get anywhere. And a lot of people I find in church don't talk to listen. They talk because they want to be heard. And I think
they talk to respond instead.
Or they talk to respond. And I think we need to do more listening. And I say that to myself all the time, because and I'm learning that through my children, actually, because when as a parent, when you're saying something to a 3-year-old and you're debating with a 3-year-old, you're not really debating with the 3-year-old, because a 3-year-old has my son is very headstrong, and what he says really goes. But I have to actually understand and listen to what he's trying to tell me, because what he's saying and what he's trying to tell me are not necessarily the same thing. And I think that's with all of us, that sometimes what we're saying and what we're trying to and what we want to be heard are not necessarily the same things. And sometimes we just need to hear what the person's saying as opposed to what's coming out of their mouth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on the back of that, and I think it's extraordinary that Shelley's saying that even as a twin, how similar your twin is, there's different individuals. And I'd like to answer your question, Tom, about what being a disagreeable. And I think it goes back to the whole conveyor belt kind of Adventism that we see practice a lot. That we want somebody to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to sound a certain way. And when you're coming to the conversation with that presupposition, you ain't really coming to really communicate. You're really coming to convert and to change somebody. And you know, and I think we as Adventists, we have a struggle with it's either right or wrong. There's no in between. There's no gray areas. There's no compromise. Anything, it's either left or right. And I think that even goes back to our understanding of just having all the answers. We know all the answers, so we know what's right and what's wrong. And anything that is, it's either right or wrong. There's nothing else in between that. So
the thing is, though, right. even with your analogy of left or right, no middle ground, even if it is left or right, I think our issue is that we don't ask ourselves the question, well, when should a person turn left or turn right? Is it on our time frame, or is it when their relationship with God gets them there? Because I think the issue is not so much that there's a left or a right. The issue is, I want you to turn right now because I decided that right is right today. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'll have a Bible study, or I'll have a life experience that will lead me to a particular understanding of a particular truth. Let's say whether it's drinking alcohol or sex before marriage or my ideas on divorce. And I've only just arrived at this reality this year, but now you're hearing it for the first time, and I'm expecting you to agree with what I've seen over 15 years today. And I think that's the problem is, I think yeah, sorry, bro.
So no, as well, and I think that goes both ways to not just the traditional Adventists, but also the more progressive Adventism, because I think progressive Adventism tells something to a member that has this tradition for 50 years and expects them to just change straight away. And I think the same with traditional Adventism, expects something from progressive Adventism and says change straight away. And I think it works both. I think it can work both ways. And I also want to kind of highlight what Shelley was saying about listening. And I think we don't ever listen. You know, like you said, we listen to respond. And true, like active, like reflective listening is really removing yourself out of the conversation. Like you are sacrificing yourself in this conversation in order to listen to somebody. It's devoting your full attention to understanding that person's position. You're not there to insert yourself. And I think Adventism always wants to insert itself, always wants to advise, to disprove, to approve, to judge, to blame. And what people really want in terms of authentic relationship, I believe, is that they want really active listening, to the point where you stop inserting yourself in the conversation, seek to understand that person. And then when you're able to do that, you can really understand that person's internal process and begin to mirror this individual. And I think it's the way that we communicate. And we have to attempt to remove ourselves from the conversation and devote ourselves to listening to that person, to understand them. And I think if we just begin to listen some more, I think, you know, things will be a lot different. That's just my understanding of that.
No, and I agree with what you both said, Laura, and then I'll come in with a point.
Yeah, I just can't. I mean, I'm listening about the listening part, and it's so true. Actually, I've been reading books on that. I'm working on that myself for the last couple of years. That's my personal growth area that I'm working on. I mean, everything you guys said, I'll just add one more word to listening, because listening almost equals empathy. And when we disagree with anybody on any level, somebody in your house or somebody on a church stage, you know, any situation, a person will not let their guns down or will not care for what you have to say if they feel like their point of view is not considered, if their point of view is dismissed offhand. And if we learn how to listen, it's like really getting yourself in the other person's shoes. If we genuinely learn how to do that, man, it's going to change all of our relationships. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
But the point that I wanted to bring a little different point on the back of that as well is, I think generally for many different reasons, including the fact that we're in such a digital society today, and especially the young people today when they grow up, there is so much communication that happens that is filtered, heavily filtered. I mean, you edit everything. You edit your text, you filter your pictures, you everything. So people really, they don't even come across authentic anymore. I know that people sometimes script what they're going to say when they order food, when they phone call. I mean, it's just crazy. But because we don't do face-to-face communication, rather, because we do so much filtering, people don't know how to do face-to-face communication as well anymore. And I think resolving any argument in a, being able to really argue in an intelligible way where both parties need to, first of all, be face-to-face as much as possible. And we need to learn and facilitate, learning how to talk face-to-face. Because today, I mean, you go online, you put something, like one thing, and then you literally have, you think you're engaging yourself in a conversation that's important, but you leave upset, I mean, especially in the climate today, I mean, so many people literally are disconnecting from social media because we don't really know how to talk when it comes to conflicting things. And I really think a lot of it is face-to-face, so we can listen. When you're typing things and you're editing them, it's not the same. It's not the same. So I think important conversations have to happen face-to-face. And one of the things, I'll just say the word and leave it for your own, exploration, but we need to learn how to debate healthily. And debate as a bottom line includes this. It has to be somebody makes a statement that obviously somebody agrees, somebody disagrees with. Then the other person can bring in their, this is why I think different. And then there is a rebuttal. So you can go back and forth on ideas, and listening will be key there. But one of the premises of good and healthy debating is that before you even get into a conversation on something that you disagree about, you need to allow yourself to say, to be honest with yourself and say, okay, I may not be right, or they may not be wrong on this, or not all the way. So I'm willing, I'm open, I'm humble enough to recognize that their position could be valid or valid as well. If you come into a conversation with that mentality, you open the floor for creating something new. Actually, innovation happens that way, But yeah, I'll just revert back to listening and say we need to learn, we need to teach the skill of communicating face to face rather than everything filtered out. And then, and how to debate healthily, where we're not attacking ideas and individuals, but we are debating good ideas, rather, not individuals, but ideas.
Helena.
I was just thinking that I always recall like James 1:19, which says be quick to listen and slow to speak. That's something that I constantly tell myself, because I personally feel God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So listen, and I think active listening is something which is even more important. It's sort of actually, I think we live in a world where things are coming in really fast, and even though we're hearing, but listening is very different. And sort of actually absorbing the information that somebody is telling you. And I think that feeds into emotional intelligence when it comes to relationships. Being able to kind of put aside, maybe as the active listener, put aside how you're feeling and really try to empathize and understand where this other individual is coming from. And that takes time. That takes you kind of humbling yourself, maybe making yourself a little bit smaller and allowing that person to have that time and that platform to be able to really open up and be vulnerable to you. So, I think we don't always have to snap back with an answer, with a response. And maybe that's the traditional thinking. And like Warren said, the more progressive sort of Adventism is about, being more sort of reactive and being, pushing things through for the time, thinking about more evangelism and outreach, and rather than, what's feeding ourselves, what makes ourselves look good, what makes ourselves feel good. So yeah, again, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
I like that. I think off the back what you've both said, a big debate in popular culture right now is about cancel culture. Well, it was before the recent events, is about cancel culture. This idea that if you say something I don't like, instead of us going back and forth in order to understand each other and develop our own thinking, we just cancel each other. I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm blocking you. And I think people who are digital natives, who are used to having 95% of their communication on a platform, be it Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, have lost the ability to really discuss ideas and reach the best idea, because it's just so simple to just lock somebody. You can press one button and they can't talk to you anymore, and you don't have to face an idea that you don't like. I remember speaking to a younger person recently, somebody about 23, 24, and he said to me one thing that he admires about my generation up is that we understand how to have a conversation. So if I don't like what you're saying, there's more of us who are able to just talk and have the conversation and arrive somewhere, as opposed to just canceling and locking each other off. Because digital natives, that's how they resolve problems, is I'm canceling you, I'm blocking you. And as we finish up the conversation, I want to ask you guys the question: what would happen if we elevated love and relationship above the transmission of truth and information? How would church transform in that economy? And I'm hearing a lot of us talking about love being so important, and understanding, active listening. And when we reminisced about the relationships that were key to us growing up, it was very much about this personal relationship, people who were with us every day of the week, not just Sabbath relationships. And I want to, there's two texts that I want to quickly read. One is Romans chapter 13, verse 8, and I'm reading the ESV version, Romans 13, verse 8. And it says, "Owe no one anything except love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." Now, for a people who are very obsessed about the law, fulfilling the law, knowing everything, how does this change the game? That love is the loving each other is the fulfillment of the law. If I love you, then I have fulfilled the law. How does this change the game for us as Adventists? And I think as Adventists, in my reflection, before you guys comment, it seems that love is too simple for us. I think Adventists love complicated. If you can give Adventists something that's going to take them 6 months of headache to understand, then they will love you for life. But if you tell them something just simple, just love that person, they're like, no, it can't be as easy as just love that person. It must be something else. And it's like, no, just love that person. How do you think it would change the game, Juanita, if we elevated loving each other, our relationship with each other, above our need to tell you what I know?
Do you know, with the onset of COVID-19, there's been many difficult parts of it. We've lost people losing and people being sick and everything else. But I feel that this is an opportunity to bounce forward and not return back to. We can't go back to what was normal. We can't go back to November, December 2019 or January. We are here now, and we can only go forward and go for the new. So I think it's a perfect time to introduce love, although we should have known it centuries ago. It's a perfect time because we have been vulnerable. You know, our trousers have been pulled down. It's like we are scared. We don't know the context of this thing. Where's it going to end? Where we thought we knew. I think we, as a church, for the past 150, 60 years, were ready for something like this. And then we weren't ready. You know, everybody shut down. And I feel that love will come out of something like this, where when I just see my family on Zoom, it brings tears. With somebody playing a Marvin Gaye track in the background, it's just nostalgic, and it's like, oh my days, I can't wait to squeeze you. I can't wait to kiss your face. Something like this has made us thirsty for love. It's made us want something very simple and very profound as love. We want simple things now, as I've got a park behind my house. And when I first moved here, I thought, oh, that park's so grubby. You know, I got to wash my shoes when I get back and all stuff like that. I can't get enough of that park. I want simple things like going to the park. I bought a bike with a basket on the front, and I'm going to have flowers coming out of it next week, and ride with a dress and sing an operatic voice. I want that. That's simple. Yeah. I want to see the kids splash in the paddling pool. Do you know what I mean? I don't like to play Monopoly. I'll go for 10 minutes with Monopoly. Do you know what I mean?
You're not serious when you. That's why.
Seriously, I can't. My 17, nearly old, she will go on all night. I'm not up for it, bruv. Yeah. I am not up for it. Simple things in life, eating together, going to Tesco is like a day out. So nowadays we're wanting it to come down and become just very manageable. I can manage this much. And so I think in this much has to include love. So I think it will come quite naturally, even though it's coming through the screen. There's an authenticity about love, especially when you're scared. especially when you don't know what's going to happen next. So I don't think we're going to have to fake the funk. We're not going to have to beg for love. I think it will come naturally. But I think with whatever's coming, we're bouncing forward too. In order to create authentic relationships with love, we're going to have to take it smaller. We're going to have to take it back to the original design of you come to my house, you eat with me, we break bread, we talk about issues. I pay for that bill, you pay for that bill. I cry with you. I think it has to, we're disillusioning ourselves if we think that that's going to happen in a church of 350 people strong, that we're going to make strong, positive, loving relationships. It has to be done on a smaller scale. I think it's so possible with this now.
Warren, just before you jump in, I just off the back of that real quick, I remember one time they were saying that you can't come into the supermarket 2 by 2. So I was queuing up outside with my wife, and when we got to the front, the guy was just like, "Now one of you has to wait outside," and that happened for like a couple of days. Yeah, it hurt. Like I was like, I never realized I enjoyed being in the supermarket with my wife this way. I've never wanted to be buying vegetables with my wife as much as I did that week. And it's something just as silly and as simple as that I think we are now going to appreciate more. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to go back to basics in a way that we couldn't have made ourselves do before this crisis. But Warren.
Yeah, Tom, I want to correct something you said a little bit. You were saying that love is a simple thing. And I don't think it is. I don't think love is simple. I think it's hard. You know, I think it is difficult to love. And I think as Adventists, we have done the easy part. We have just transmitted knowledge. And I think that is just that's the simple part. But to actually love, to actually bring somebody close to us, to actually bring somebody within our vicinity, to actually bring somebody close to us, I think that is the difficult part. And I think even though it may sound simplistic, we haven't got it because we haven't gotten it yet because it is so hard. Like imagine loving somebody. Like the church is literally filled many generations, many different cultures, many race backgrounds, ethnicities, ages, like in, you know, abilities, like in the church is so diverse. And you know, and then when we look in the community also is diverse. And to say to love somebody, I think there is weight in that. There's meat behind that. I don't think that's simple. I think that's heavy. That's heavy to love somebody, and to love them the way that Jesus wants to love them. And I think when we begin to put relationship, just going back to your question, when we begin to put relationship above doctrine, as you would say, I wouldn't even say above doctrine. When we start speaking more about relationship, I think you know, there's going to be an outflowing of compassion and empathy, as Laura was describing. And I think when we have that compassion and empathy, just like Juanita was saying, you know, it will come naturally. But I think what the church will look like, as you said, in that economy, I think we'll begin to have conversations that people care about. We will begin to talk about things that the world is talking about, talk about things that the community is talking about. And I think when we are lacking of empathy, when we lack compassion, we kind of put ourselves in a vacuum or an Adventist bubble, and we're not real, we're not relevant. And I think when we begin to have compassion, your heart will bleed. Your heart will bleed for the issues going on around us. Like when you hear about the issues of COVID, your heart will bleed. It will move you to compassion, like Jesus would, like it would say about Jesus when he saw people wanting food and he was in the desert, and the Bible says he was moved with compassion. He had to do something. He had to feed them. And I think that's what naturally will happen. When we have compassion for our community, we will cry with them. We'll speak. We cannot be silent about what's going on right now. When you talk about the killing of George Floyd, when you talk about the protesting that's going on, we talk about all, you know, when we talk about all of these things, compassion looks like the church, us, being a voice to the voiceless. And when we have compassion, we wouldn't think twice about offending or think twice about ruffling feathers, because I have so much compassion for you. I just can't keep silent. I just can't keep silent that our black brothers are being gunned down on the street and massacred. I can't keep silent about the injustice. I can't keep silent about what's going on with COVID and black and brown people, you know, dying more at this COVID. And I think when we begin to have compassion, we begin to start caring about what the world cares about, caring about what our community is caring about. And I think just a little bit of compassion and a little bit of work, not even a little, much work. Love is hard, love is difficult. And we need to get back to that simple four-letter word, but it's a difficult thing. And we have to be intentional about loving not just our neighbors in the church, but our neighbors in our global community.
And do you know that's a fantastic segue to we're going to wrap up now. That's a fantastic segue into what we're going to discuss on Wednesday. Shelley,
can I say 3 quick points, and they are quick points?
Yeah.
So as Warren said, love is not easy, but if it was easy, we wouldn't need a whole chapter in 1 Corinthians 13 to tell us what it is. And so I'm not going to read it, but if you replace your name with love, so Shelley is patient, and Shelley is kind, and Shelley is slow to forgive, slow to anger and quick to forgive. If that was easy, then we would find ourselves in a much easier place. But I have a fundamental issue with the question that you asked. How is church going? If we elevated love, how will church look like when we go back? What's wrong with this now? If we actually start manifesting love now, our churches might actually look like the communities that we reside in. How about that? That we wouldn't be saying to the Johns of the world, "Oh, thank you for coming, my brother, because you're from the indigenous." No, we would see that would be our regular, because actually a lot of our churches are commuter churches. So actually, if we actually loved our community, we would be seeing that our neighbours that we live in our blocks with, or the neighbour next door, and so on and so forth. Even if they are of a different faith, they might come and visit on a regular basis for particular events. And my third thing is this: God manifests his love in community. This was, and we were talking about this earlier, that when he created man and he saw that it wasn't good for him to be alone, he wanted there to be community, because he recognized that love and he could dwell in it. Love could dwell in where 2 or 3 are gathered. So it's not just for those that have got families, it's for those that are singles as well. We need to reach out to those people now that we know are lonely, that don't necessarily live on a digital platform. That elderly member that we know is down the road, just give her a call or slip a little note through the letterbox saying you're being thought of. Love manifests and looks at different ways, and it might not be easy, but it's not necessarily, it's not difficult either in terms of showing love. Showing love continually may be difficult, but we need to step out of this, what we're going to do when we go back,
and
we need to do it from now. Now.
That's powerful.
Now
that's a powerful concept, and I think I take what both of you have said. I want to end with this Philippians 2:3-8, and it's a text that we're very familiar with, but to live it is a different kettle of fish, because it goes against the very foundational cornerstone of human nature. And Philippians 2:3 it says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself." That's the part that every human being walking the earth is like, so count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality to be with God, but emptied himself, making himself a form of a servant, and being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point even of death at the cross. But this idea of putting others, or considering others, or counting others as being more significant than yourself, I think for me is the grounding principle of how church can be, because everything transforms when I think of Juanita before I think of myself. Session changes, Sabbath school discussions changes, nominating committee changes, the way we do praise and worship changes, the way we even think about my preference for music versus your preference for music changes. All of these things transform when we have this mind in us that was also in Christ Jesus. And I think if we can do that whilst respecting the fact that we are all on different journeys, and as long as we're going that way, then we're in the right direction, then we're cool. People don't have to walk at the same speed as me. We just have to be walking towards Christ. And I think as Adventists, this is a fundamental thing. And in terms of actionable points, I always like to finish with actionable points, things that we can go and do. I think in every interaction, as Shelley has said, from now, whatever your next Zoom call is, because that's where we're interacting now. Whenever your next Zoom call is, begin to practice this. How do I put that person's needs before mine? I really want to say this, and I really want this, but how do I first think about what that person might need and what that person might consider to be love? And whenever you're having an argument or a debate about doctrine or about truth, and about what you have discovered to be the truth, and somebody else has a different perspective, give them the respect and the space to go on their journey. Because in the same way that everything you know today you didn't know from the day you were born, you had to go on a journey to learn, is the same that somebody else is going on a journey to learn. Let us give each other the space and the room that we need in order to be able to have the convictions that come from a relationship with God. And I think between these two things, we already have our work cut out in terms of our own natural natures. I know for me, especially in the debate, anybody who's known me for more than 5 minutes knows that debate is my central entertainment. Like, I could debate more than I could eat food. And so for me, all right, Winnie, we don't need to agree. So Shelley, we don't need to agree so enthusiastically. However, I need to learn. And I know for me, it's so difficult to say, but I know this is right. And I want to demolish this person with my right debate or my right argument. But actually, there's something more important than just being right. And that is loving my brother, loving my sister, loving my companions and my colleagues in church. This is obviously scratching the surface, but I love you all very much. And thank you for making the time to come and have this conversation. I have learned a lot. And I hope those who have been listening online have learned a lot, and not just learn for the sake of having information as we've discussed, but learn to be able to go and live this kind of love out in our communities and within our own communities from now. Shelley wants us to do it now, from your next Zoom phone call, and she's correct. On Wednesday, we're going to be live again. So tomorrow we have a break in the youth section, but Wednesday we're going to be back again off the heels of what Warren has just been talking about. We're going to be talking about community and justice. What does that look like? As people of faith, what does it look like to pursue justice and to want to do justice? Are we supposed to just pray for them? Jesus will fix it when he comes back. Or are we supposed to be doing something more proactive than that in the community? Somebody told me this week in preparation for this that justice is love in action. And it resonated with me. And also to reflect on what you said, Warren, real quick. Love, I think, is beyond me seeing a Black person being killed and having my heart pricked, because that's easy. I think what I've learned through this process is, where was I when the people in Hong Kong were being killed because they're trying to find their independence? Where was I when the Palestinians were being killed in the conflicts that are going on over there? Where was I when the trans people were being oppressed and treated as less than human beings? I think there are things beyond what affects me directly, and I have privilege in many other spaces. I have privilege because I'm a heterosexual male, which means there are many experiences I will not have, many persecutions I will not go through. Privilege is ignoring something because it doesn't personally affect me. And what I've learned through this experience is that I must show compassion for people who are being persecuted in ways that I will never be persecuted. And I think that for me has been the lesson of this. But all of you, I love you all. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for those of you who have come online to support us. And we'll see you all on Wednesday at 9 p.m.
Thank you, Tom. Keep up the work. Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll see you. So the viewers online, we will see you guys on Wednesday evening. And we will have another fantastic conversation then about justice in the community. Abigail, love, you are my co-moderator, but unfortunately the system was an enemy of progress. But we're going to know for next time what we can do and can't do. But everyone, please show some love to Abigail. She was coaching me in the background what questions to ask. and how to respond to certain things that were happening. So thank you so much for your support on that, and we'll be back in the seat again on Wednesday, having another fantastic conversation with you guys about justice. Abigail,
catch you Wednesday.
Pardon?
Catch you on Wednesday, and it was
Catch
great.
you Wednesday. Take care. See you later, everyone. All right, bye-bye.